Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime. And I am your host, as always, Professor Prime. And welcome to my Math in the World series, the series where I talk about math and how it connects with and relates to different topics. And those topics include, but are not limited to, academic fields, professional fields, activities that we see and do in our everyday life, activities that are quite niche, franchises, different forms of media, and really anything that I want to do for a given video because math is everywhere, and that's something that I'm hoping everyone will see in this series and also see that it's not something to fear but something to actually empower us. That being said, this video is going to be on math and Pokemon, more specifically the video games, even more specifically the combat. And I had some other videos that were kind of like leading up to this that like are like fun to watch, and I'll link those in the description so I don't like waste time explaining a lot about those. But they are worth checking out. So yeah, check that description when you get a chance. Yeah. So where to start, right? So I think the easiest way is to talk about the fundamentals. So kind of like some of the things that we might have seen in Gen 1 because the fundamentals haven't really changed that much in the main games. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot has changed, and the game's mechanics have evolved. But like, it is still what it was at its core. So let's get into it, and I'll try to not over-explain because there's actually so much you could say about Pokemon. But uh, as you go forward, right, you have Pokemon that you can capture, and I don't want to get into the capture mechanics, but there's math in that too. But so I'll focus on like trainer battles. Even though yeah, you fight Pokemon in the wild too, but like some of the stuff that I mentioned in the trainer battles, it kind of covers our bases there too, um, for the most part. So yeah, when you think about like the trainers that you battle throughout the game, you have your regular trainers, your gym leaders, and Elite Four, your champion, your rival, and you could also connect to people on the outside world. And back in the day, it was via the link cable. Nowadays, it's Wi-Fi. But either way, um, here's the kind of picture I want to paint. When you have those battles, what do those largely consist of? Well, you can have a max of 6 Pokemon, with one being out at a time, but you can switch back and forth. But that could be to your detriment. But we can kind of get into that too. Um, and so yeah, you have 6 Pokemon max, right? And then with each of those Pokemon, they have 4 moves each that they can have, and they have their own stats, and things related to that. So each Pokemon also has a level, and as you increase that level, their stats also increase, um, and that gives you an idea of things. And as they evolve, they get like a bit of a boost there in terms of stats, and they're able to maybe learn moves that they weren't able to learn before. And then when it comes to the moves, like each of the Pokemon has at least one type, possibly two. And with those types, they come with certain advantages and disadvantages because with Pokemon, it's kind of like a rock, paper, scissors sort of deal. And so the big things are if you have a move hit you and your type is weak to that move, it's going to do double the damage that it would have done. And something to kind of keep in mind as we're talking about this is that each move has like if it's an attack move, it has a certain amount of damage that it can do, and like that also can be affected by the different stats as well as type. So, but getting back to what I was just saying, if I have a grass type and that grass type gets hit with a fire move, and grass is weak to fire, then that fire move is going to do double the damage to me. So I got to be careful because like that's also a pretty common attack type. And on the flip side, if I have a Pokemon and I'm using a move that's strong against another type, then I'm going to be doing double the damage to them. right? So like if I have, sorry, if I'm using an electric move and I'm using that against a water Pokemon, then I'm going to do double the damage that that move would normally do. Now, if my type is electric, then I get what's called a same type attack bonus. So that electric move on any Pokemon would do double the damage on that water Pokemon. But if I have an electric type, then it's a stab move, and I'm doing double the damage, and that's kind of crazy to consider. And so you have like when you're talking about strengths and weaknesses, you know, you have like how the damage works there when you're dishing it out or taking it in the, we're talking about doubling, but you could also have a resistance, or your opponent can have a resistance to the move, in which case it'd be half, or depending on the situation, maybe a quarter. Depends, right? But my main thing is there's lots of things to just consider on that basic level. So when you're going in, and let's say you know you have a 6 versus 6 sort of situation, you want to consider your Pokemon and their types. You want to consider their moves. You want to consider how well they're covered. Like you know, like maybe it's not a great idea to have them all have one type, because if you get a type that like is resistant to it, you're not doing as much damage. And if you get a type that's immune to that type of move, then it's not going to do any damage. And one example of that is like if I have a ground type, it's the only type that is immune to electric types. So electric moves cannot actually affect ground. But on the flip side, um, ground moves can't affect flying types. They're immune to that. And it's kind of funny because when you're looking at that, electric beats flying. And I think that's kind of funny. So things are, like, I think, for the most part, well designed on that part. Things kind of balance out. But yeah, so that's kind of like at the core some of the things that you have to consider. Now, as we go forward, there are things that you could do in the game that change things, and there's things to consider in the main game versus like the meta game where you're fighting other people. So in the main game, some of the stuff that I mentioned, it's like it helps, but it's not as important. But the idea is, if I catch a Pokemon, right? You know, it has a certain stats, and it levels up, and those stats rises. And I don't think I had mentioned it before, but like when we're talking about those stats, you know, it's like, okay, you got your HP, you got your attack, your defense, your special attack, special defense, the speed, and all that good stuff. In the first gen, the special attack and special defense were not separated, but and I think it's interesting. But so there's all that, right? So as your Pokemon is growing, those things increase, and if they're capable of evolving, those stats increase even more. But there's things that you can do, and this has evolved over time as well. So there's two like hidden mechanics and that pertain to like a Pokemon and their stats. So there are IVs, which are individual values, and you can kind of think of those as like the genes of a Pokemon. And so like some people spend a lot of time using like the breeding mechanics like that were developed in Gen 2, to like you know kind of breed a Pokemon with like good IVs. So like they might be more naturally strong or something like that, right? So that affects battles. And then the other one is like EVs, which like they existed in some form or another as early as Gen 1, same as IVs, but back then they were determinate values, and they later would be called like effort values. And the idea there is, look, your Pokemon is just fighting different types of Pokemon. Those Pokemon give them certain EV points, and with those EV points, it goes to certain things. So if I defeat like a Pokemon, I don't know, let's say a Pidgey, because I would have to like look to make sure this is like right. So this is just an example, but if I took down a Pidgey, like maybe that gives me a certain amount of points to like my speed, for instance. And you can keep on playing that game, and you can increase EVs, but you could also do that through items like vitamins. You could do that through berries as well. And so with EVs and IVs, though, they've been largely hidden, and but you know players have figured it out over years. And since Gen 6, at least with the EVs, they don't give you the exact values, but they do give you kind of like a diagram to look at, see where you're at. You know, there's various reasons for that, but it's just as interesting. So there's like some hidden math, which I know sounds horrifying, but it's there. Whew. And like I said, I don't want these to get too long, so I'll see if I can tighten it up a little bit. Um, so in Gen 2 and onward, things get even more complicated, I feel, because you get berries that could raise certain stats or like heal you and stuff like that, and that affects combat. Um, but yeah, so you have like those that you can give people, but you also have like held items, and those held items can also boost your stats. And of course, like I said, you could take vitamins, and that helps too. And then later on, you get abilities, and those abilities can boost your stats too, or you get certain moves that can boost your stats. And then you get weather conditions that can also boost certain stats, and affect certain strengths or weaknesses. And yeah, so it gets kind of wild. It gets incredibly intricate, and this easily could have been several videos. Um, but yeah, so I think that's pretty cool. In the main line, it gets kind of complicated if you're not careful, and if you're into like the competitive scene, and you're into that like all that, like you're looking into different tier lists, and like you might go to different tournaments, and they might have different rules, so you have to like consider all of that. And I think it's kind of crazy. And it is worth noting that like people have won scholarships for Pokemon tournaments before. I think like in both card game and in the video game circuit. So I mean that's something to consider. But yeah, so I was trying to think if there was anything else. Like I guess some people have created some pretty innovative strategies where there might be some Pokemon that you would think would be pretty useless, but due to like just some players exploiting certain like aspects of the game because they were clever enough to do so, they're rewarded by doing some really wonky stuff that shouldn't really happen. Um, and there's a lot of math in that too. And like in another video, one of the things that I want to talk about that affected the first generation was like the rare candy code, and that's gonna be a fun one. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this. I hope you learn more about the combat and Pokemon. And like I said, this could have easily been several videos. I just didn't want to make that several videos, so I tried to give you all like the highlights. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Professor Prime out.